Right now, oil is trading at over $100 a barrel. Gas at the pump just hit $4.43 a gallon. And if you have lived through this before, and a lot of you have, you already know what comes next: the grocery store. 47 years ago, in 1979, Americans stood in lines just like the ones forming today. They watched the price of a gallon of milk climb week after week. They watched chains they had shopped at for generations, A&P, Winn-Dixie, Pathmark, Bruno's, start closing stores, then closing whole regions, then disappearing entirely. What you are about to hear is not a prediction. It is a post-mortem. 10 American grocery chains, household names, that walked into the same storm we are walking into right now and never walked out. Some of them over a century old. The financial autopsies are public record. The Wall Street firms that bled them dry are still operating today, still doing the exact same thing. And the chain at number 1 on this list, the one nobody saw coming, was the largest retailer in America for nearly 100 years. These are the 10 American grocery chains Wall Street could not save, and honestly, did not try to. The mechanism is always the same. Oil goes up, diesel follows, trucking costs explode, refrigeration costs explode, even the plastic packaging, which is made from petroleum, costs more. And within a couple of months, the cascade reaches a grocer's profit margin. And in this industry, that margin has always been razor thin, 1 to 2% on a good day. Some chains have the balance sheet to absorb it. Most do not. And the ones that do not, they become the names on this list. Number 10, Fresh and Easy. You may not remember this one if you do not live out west, and that is part of the story. Fresh and Easy was supposed to be the future of American grocery shopping. Smaller stores, fresh, ready-to-eat meals. The British company Tesco launched the chain in 2007, right before the financial crisis hit, and they spent over $1 billion trying to crack the US market. It did not work. By 2013, Tesco was done. That is when the billionaire Ron Burkle stepped in. His private equity firm, Yucaipa Companies, bought 150 Fresh and Easy stores out of bankruptcy. He brought in a former 7-Eleven CEO. He told the press it was a turnaround. The employees believed it. The vendors believed it. Customers believed it. 6 months later, quietly, with no announcement, Yucaipa transferred 19 of the most valuable Fresh and Easy store properties out of the company. They just moved them to a separate company they personally controlled. The grocery stores did not own the buildings anymore. The private equity firm did. 18 months after that, in October 2015, Fresh and Easy filed for bankruptcy again. About 3,000 workers lost their jobs in the final shutdown, after roughly 4,000 had been moved over in 2013. Many local food vendors were left holding millions in unpaid invoices and recovered only pennies on the dollar. But here is the part that matters. Yucaipa kept those 19 properties, sold them later, made a profit. The grocery chain failed, the workers lost everything, the suppliers got wiped out, and the private equity firm walked away richer than when it started. That is the playbook, and you are going to hear it again, and again, and again. Number 9, Bruno's supermarkets. To understand what happened to Bruno's, you have to start with a tragedy. In December 1991, a corporate plane carrying several members of the Bruno family crashed in the mountains of North Georgia. There were no survivors. The founders of one of the South's most beloved family grocery chains were gone in a single afternoon. Bruno's had started in 1932 in Birmingham, Alabama, in a single 800-square-foot corner store. By the late 1980s, it had grown into a Southern institution. Excellent service, strong community ties, real philanthropy. The kind of store where the cashiers knew your kids' names and the manager remembered which brand of coffee your mother liked. After the crash, the family was devastated. The company was passed through a series of out-of-state owners, none of whom understood the South or the customers. And in 2005, the worst of them showed up. A private equity firm called Lone Star Funds, based in Dallas. Lone Star ran the standard playbook. They loaded the company with debt. They starved the stores of money for upkeep. The shelves got worse. The lighting got worse. The parking lots got worse. Loyal customers started drifting over to Publix and Walmart, not because they wanted to, but because Bruno's was visibly falling apart. Then 2008 hit, and here is where the storm comes in. Oil shot up to $147 a barrel that summer, the highest price in history at the time. Diesel followed. Food costs surged. The Great Recession crushed Alabama's working families. Every other grocery chain in the South had to absorb the same shock. The healthy ones absorbed it. Publix absorbed it. Kroger absorbed it. Bruno's did not have anything left to absorb with. Lone Star had already taken it. In February 2009, just 6 months after the financial crisis peaked, Bruno's filed for bankruptcy and cost more than 7,000 workers their jobs. Suppliers across Alabama and Mississippi were left fighting over scraps in court. The 77-year-old chain that had survived the Great Depression, 2 world wars, and the loss of its own founders in a plane crash could not survive a Dallas private equity firm. That timeline is going to keep showing up, so just keep it in the back of your mind. Number 8. Marsh Supermarkets. Here is something most people do not know. The very first product ever scanned with a barcode at a grocery store was rung up at a Marsh supermarket in Troy, Ohio, on June 26, 1974. It was a 10-pack of Wrigley's Juicy Fruit Gum. Marsh was that kind of company, a Midwestern family business that ran fast and ran smart. By the early 2000s, they had over 100 high-end supermarkets and 150 convenience stores across Indiana and Ohio. They were innovators. They were profitable. They were beloved. In 2006, a Florida private equity firm called Sun Capital Partners bought them. And this is the place to explain something, because the same trick is going to come up over and over on this list. It is called a leveraged buyout. Sounds technical. It is not. A leveraged buyout is when an investment firm wants to buy a company, but they do not want to use their own money to do it. So they buy the company and make the company itself take on the debt. Like if I bought your house, but I made you take out the mortgage. That is what happened here. Sun Capital put up only $88 million of their own money. The rest of the deal, $276 million in debt, was loaded onto Marsh. Then they did the real damage. Marsh owned the actual buildings its stores sat in. That real estate was worth a fortune. Sun Capital sold all of it. Well over $100 million in real estate value. The grocery stores were now forced to pay rent to a new landlord on the same buildings they used to own. Think about what that means for your home. Imagine you owned your house outright, no mortgage, and one day someone sold the house out from under you, kept the money, and then made you pay rent to keep living in it. That is what was done to Marsh Supermarkets. The company struggled along for 10 years, choking on debt and rent. It filed for bankruptcy in May 2017. The brand was a 90-plus-year-old brand. It is now gone. But here is the part that does not sit right. Sun Capital walked away with their money plus profit before the bankruptcy was even filed. The top executives at Marsh got $14 million in fully protected retirement payouts, including $7 million for the former CEO. And the workers? Sun Capital walked away from over $80 million they legally owed in worker severance and pensions. A retired warehouse worker named Kilby Baker, 70 years old at the time, said this to a reporter, and here it is in his own words. "They did everyone dirty. My pension check was cut by about 25% after Marsh withdrew from the pension. We all gave up wage increases so we could have a better pension. Then they just took it away from us. That man worked his entire life for that pension, gave up raises for it. and it was taken from him so a Florida private equity firm could close out a profitable trade. Yeah, that is what happened. Number 7. Haggen. This one is short because the whole collapse was short. Haggen was a Pacific Northwest grocery chain founded in 1933. Family-run, 30 profitable stores, a loyal customer base in Washington state, the kind of regional chain that had survived for nearly 80 years by minding its own business. In 2011, a private equity firm called Comvest Partners bought 80% of it. Then in 2014, 2 giant grocery chains, Albertsons and Safeway, wanted to merge. The federal government said, fine, but you have to sell off 146 stores to keep things competitive. Comvest pounced. They used Haggen to buy all of those stores. Overnight, a 30-store chain became a 176-store chain. It was a disaster from day one. The pricing was wrong. The new stores looked nothing like the old Haggen brand. Customers in California and Arizona had no idea what a Haggen was. And while all of this was unfolding, Comvest had quietly separated the real estate from the operating stores. The same trick we just heard about with Marsh. Less than 12 months after the big acquisition, Haggen collapsed. Bankruptcy. All 164 stores closed or sold off. Many of them sold right back to Albertsons at fire sale prices. The unsecured creditors, the workers and suppliers, were owed about $100 million. They sued Comvest. They argued, correctly, that Comvest had set up the deal so that the real estate company would survive while the grocery stores were guaranteed to fail. The creditors lost the lawsuit. The court said it was all legal. Number 6. Southeastern Grocers, or, as you probably know them, Winn-Dixie and Buyouts. How many of you grew up shopping at a Winn-Dixie? Because there was a time when you could not drive 5 miles in any southern state without seeing those red letters. The Beef People. Founded in 1925 by the Davis brothers in Florida, a Fortune 500 giant, the dominant grocer of the Sun Belt for 2 generations. Then, Wall Street found them. A Dallas private equity firm called Lone Star Funds, yes, the same one that destroyed Bruno's, got their hands on Buyouts first in 2009. Then, in 2012, Lone Star used Buyouts to buy Winn-Dixie for $560 million. They merged the two into a new holding company called Southeastern Grocers. And then, they ran the playbook. Real estate sale-leasebacks, new debt, big dividend payments to themselves. 6 years of this. By 2018, the company was suffocating. They filed for bankruptcy. Nearly 100 stores closed immediately. Southern towns that had counted on that Winn-Dixie for 30 years lost their main grocery store overnight. And of course, the bankruptcy was used to do what these bankruptcies always do: withdraw from the workers' pension plan. Drastically reduce what people had been promised after a lifetime of work. Lone Star walked away just fine. Their billionaire founder, John Grocers, did not lose a wink of sleep. Okay, so if you have made it this far, you are seeing what I am seeing. This is not 10 different stories. This is one story, told 10 different ways. The same firms, the same tactics, the same victims, and the same outcome. If this is the kind of investigative work you want more of, the kind that actually names names and traces the money, please consider subscribing to the channel. Subscribing means tapping that red button under the video. It costs you nothing. It does not give the channel your email or any personal information. What it does is tell YouTube to show you when we post a new investigation. That is it. And while you are there, hit the bell next to the subscribe button so you actually get notified. A lot of people on this channel have told me they thought they were subscribed and were missing every single video. So check the bell. Now, back to the list. And the next 4 are the ones that really show you how the whole machine works. Number 5, Grand Union. Of all the chains on this list, Grand Union is the oldest. Founded in 1872 in Scranton, Pennsylvania by the Jones brothers. They started with horse-drawn wagons delivering tea and spices to people's doorsteps. Think about that. 1872. That is 7 years after the Civil War ended. That is before the telephone was invented, before the light bulb, before automobiles existed. Grand Union sold tea by horse cart to families whose grandfathers fought at Gettysburg. By the middle of the 20th century, it had grown into one of the largest grocery chains in the Northeast, with hundreds of stores across New York, New Jersey, Vermont, and the Caribbean. It survived World War I. It survived the Great Depression. It survived World War II. It survived the inflation crisis of the 1970s. It survived the recession of the early 1980s. And then, in 1989, an investment banker named Gary Hirsch and his Wall Street firm bought it for $1.2 billion in a leveraged buyout. Hirsch loaded the company with $325 million in junk bonds and another $545 million in bank loans. The interest payments alone destroyed the business. Crushed under the weight of this debt, Grand Union suffered a net loss of $313 million in 1993 alone. Bankruptcy in 1995. Bankruptcy again in 1998. Bankruptcy a third time in 2000. By 2001, there was no money left to even put food on the shelves. The company that had sold tea to Civil War widows could not afford to stock its own stores. 129 years of history ended. Gary Hirsch had collected his fees decades earlier. He never paid a personal dollar. Number 4. Tops Markets. If you live in upstate New York, in western Pennsylvania, in Vermont, you know Tops, the friendly neighborhood grocer. Reliable, profitable, quietly running for almost a century. In 2007, Morgan Stanley, yes, the Wall Street investment bank, bought Tops in a leveraged buyout for $310 million. And then, over the next 6 years, Morgan Stanley did something so brazen that a federal bankruptcy judge later called it, and these are his exact words, lavish and illegal. Took me a minute to figure out what I was actually looking at when I first read this part, because what they did is, on paper, almost unbelievable. Morgan Stanley forced Tops to take out 4 separate loans from outside lenders, massive loans. And the entire purpose of those loans, every single dollar, was to pay Morgan Stanley's investors a series of dividend payments. $375 million in cash dividends, paid out to Morgan Stanley by a grocery chain that had to borrow the money to send it. The first of these payments, $105 million, was made in October 2009. According to the bankruptcy lawsuit that came later, Tops was already insolvent at that point, already broke. They paid the dividend anyway. So, in plain English, Morgan Stanley made Tops borrow money so Tops could give the borrowed money to Morgan Stanley. While doing this, the workers' pension plan was $15 million in the hole. Morgan Stanley did not put a dime toward fixing it. The pension shortfall would eventually grow to $515 million. By 2013, Morgan Stanley exited the deal. They had collected $375 million in dividends, more than they had paid for the entire company. They were done. Tops was left with $650 million in debt. In February 2018, Tops filed for bankruptcy. They used the bankruptcy court to legally back out of the union pension plan. 12,000 grocery workers, 700 Teamsters, people who had budgeted their entire retirement around those checks. A longtime Tops employee named John told a local newspaper exactly what it felt like. He said, When Top's pension contributions were ended after the bankruptcy, it was a slap in the face to all Top's employees. Knowing that we wouldn't get the full benefit we worked for over the years was a hard pill to swallow. My cut would have been about $495 a month, just about the amount of our monthly fees for maintenance at our house. $495 a month. That is the difference between making your house payment and losing your house. That is the difference between groceries and ramen noodles. That was taken from him so Morgan Stanley could close out a winning trade. The bankruptcy judge in this case, Judge Robert Drain, said something I think every American needs to hear. He said the current bankruptcy laws allow private equity owners to loot privately held companies to the detriment of their non-insider creditors with effective impunity. Plain English, what he is saying is, the law lets these firms steal from these companies and walk away clean. Loot. That is the word a federal judge used. Not me, a federal judge. Number 3, Fairway Market. Walk into a Fairway in 1985 and you would understand why it became a New York legend. Narrow aisles you could barely turn around in, mountains of fresh fruit out front, the smell of 300 kinds of cheese hitting you the moment you stepped inside. The Glickberg family started it in 1933 as a single fruit and vegetable stand on Manhattan's Upper West Side. By the early 2000s, Fairway was something close to sacred in New York City. There was a slogan, like no other market. And it was true. In 2007, the family sold a controlling stake to a private equity firm called Sterling Investment Partners. $100 million in debt was loaded onto the company immediately. Sterling pushed Fairway to expand into the suburbs, Connecticut, New Jersey, Long Island. The expansion failed. The original Manhattan stores got squeezed for cash to support the failures. Sterling then borrowed more, paid themselves another dividend. Same trick, different month. The store quality dropped. The prices went up. New Yorkers, who had loved this market for generations, started shaking their heads and walking out. Fairway filed for bankruptcy in 2016, got bought by another Wall Street firm, Blackstone, filed for bankruptcy a second time in 2020. The original company is gone. Only a handful of Fairway stores survive under new owners, a tiny remnant of what the brand once was. What hurts about Fairway is not just that it failed, it is that it failed quietly. There was no scandal, no dramatic moment. It just got drained, year after year, until there was nothing left but the name on the awning. Number 2, Pathmark. If you are over 60 and you grew up anywhere in New York, New Jersey, or Pennsylvania, you remember Pathmark, the big stores, open late, the pharmacy in the back, the deli with the actual butcher you could ask questions of. For 2 generations, Pathmark anchored neighborhoods that other grocery chains would not touch. Working class areas, urban areas, places that needed a real grocery store. The destruction of Pathmark is the longest, slowest financial murder on this list. It started in October 1987, when its parent company was taken private in a leveraged buyout. $1 billion in debt was put on the company. $1 billion. In 1987 money. For the next 13 years, almost all of Pathmark's profits were swallowed by interest payments. There was nothing left to remodel the stores, nothing to upgrade the supply chain, nothing to compete with Stop & Shop or ShopRite, who were modernizing rapidly. Pathmark stopped being a competitor and became a zombie, alive on paper, but unable to do anything except keep the lights on. In July 2000, Pathmark filed for bankruptcy. It limped out. Then, in 2005, Ron Burkle's Ukaipa firm, the same one we talked about with Fresh and Easy, bought a 40% stake. Yucaipa collected $3 million a year in management fees, and in 2007, they pushed Pathmark to be sold to A&P for $1.4 billion. That deal was funded with another $475 million in new debt. Yucaipa collected a $10 million termination fee and a 1% advisory fee on top of it. By the time A&P went down for good in 2015, Pathmark was already a corpse, being dragged behind it. Tens of thousands of workers across the Northeast lost their jobs. The neighborhoods that had counted on Pathmark for 40 years lost their grocery store. Many of those neighborhoods have not gotten one back. And now we come to number 1, the chain nobody saw coming. The chain that, if you are over 65, you almost certainly walked through as a child holding your mother's hand. A&P, the Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, founded in New York City in 1859. That is 2 years before the Civil War started. For 60 straight years, from 1915 to 1975, A&P was the largest grocery retailer in the United States. And until 1965, it was the largest American retailer of anything, bigger than Sears, bigger than anyone. Peak of 15,900 stores in the 1930s. 10% of all the food spending in America went through A&P. A&P invented modern grocery retailing. They were the original supermarket, the original Walmart. The brand was so woven into American life that for most of the 20th century, you did not say, "I am going to the grocery store." You said, "I am going to A&P." For 4 generations, A&P was where Americans bought their food. And then, in July 2015, after 156 years of business, A&P filed for bankruptcy for the second time in 5 years. The company was completely liquidated. Every store closed. The brand was erased from the American landscape entirely. Here is what killed it. In 2007, Ron Burkle's Yucaipa firm, by now you should be hearing alarm bells every time I say that name, pushed A&P to acquire Pathmark for $1.4 billion. Yucaipa happened to own a stake in Pathmark already, so Yucaipa was on both sides of the deal. The deal was funded with $475 million in new debt loaded onto A&P. That deal closed just months before the 2008 financial crisis. Oil hit $147 a barrel. The economy collapsed. A&P could not absorb it. By 2010, the company was in bankruptcy. It came out in 2012, but it came out with another $490 million in debt and another $645 million in exit financing. Nearly $1.5 billion in fresh debt loaded onto a grocery chain that was supposed to be recovering. It did not recover. In a single year, 2014 to 2015, A&P lost over $300 million. By July 2015, the company was filing for bankruptcy again, and this time it was for keeps. 28,500 Americans lost their jobs. Workers who had already given up $600 million in wages and benefits during the first bankruptcy, given them up willingly to try to save the company they had spent their lives at, were laid off anyway. The unsecured creditors, the small vendors, the local landlords, the workers themselves were owed $2.5 billion in unpaid debts. They got back about 1.5 cents on the dollar. Yucaipa? They had been collecting their advisory fees and management fees the whole time. 156 years of history. The largest retailer in America for 60 years. Erased. So here is what jumps out after going through all 10 of these. The same names keep showing up. Yucaipa, Lone Star, Sun Capital, Morgan Stanley, Sterling, Comvest. They are all still in business, today, right now, doing the exact same thing. To other companies, in other industries, probably to companies you work for, or shop at, or count on. The narrative we have all been told, that grocery chains failed because of Amazon, because of Walmart, because of changing tastes, because of high union wages, is convenient. It absolves the people who actually did this. The truth is in the court records. These chains did not lose to a free market. They were bought, loaded with debt, drained of their real estate, stripped of their pensions, and sold for parts. And here is why I am bringing all of this up right now, with oil at $126 a barrel and gas at $4.43 a gallon. Because this is the exact economic environment that finishes the job. Strong, well-managed companies survive an oil shock. They have margin, they have cash, they have reserves. The companies that have already been hollowed out by Wall Street do not. The next list of dead American grocery chains is being written right now. In boardrooms, in private equity offices, in investment banks. The names are different. The mechanism is identical. I want to know what you have seen in your own town. Was there a grocery store you grew up with that is gone now? A Winn-Dixie that closed and never reopened? An A&P your mother walked you to as a kid? A Bruno's, a Marsh, a Pathmark? Drop the name in the comments below and tell me what neighborhood it was in. I read every single one of these comments, and I want to hear from you. Because these stores were not just buildings, they were anchors. They held neighborhoods together. And when they go, they take something with them that does not come back. This is EconoNova. Keep an eye on the price of milk.